welcome to Club Book with John Scalzi. I'm your host, St. Paul writer, Naomi Kritzer. Before I introduce tonight's guest properly, allow me a moment to tell you a bit more about the unique series that is bringing him to us. Club Book is a program of MELSA, the Metropolitan Library Service Agency, made possible through Minnesota's Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and coordinated by Library Strategies, part of the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. Carver County Library is the co-organizer of this evening's talk. Thanks also to partnering bookseller Red Balloon Bookshop. A purchase link to Starter Villain will be available in the comments section of this live stream feed. Have it shipped, pick it up at their lovely store in St. Paul, or have them deliver it personally to your door if you're close to the area. One final housekeeping note, also in the comments, you will see a survey link. MELSA would greatly appreciate hearing what you think of this Club Book program. It's quick and easy. Our guest tonight, science fiction superstar John Scalzi, has gained a large and loyal following through what Kirkus Reviews calls his insufferably good trademark brand of fun yet thinky sci-fi adventure. His debut, Old Man's War, won Scalzi Speculative Fiction's Astounding, formerly John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer, and launched the New York Times bestselling series of the same name. Scalzi also penned the Locus Award-winning Interdependency trilogy and a host of popular standalone novels. The latter includes Redshirts, winner of the 2013 Hugo Award for Best Novel, and the Kaiju Preservation Society, winner of the 2023 Locus Award, and other high science fiction honors. Scalzi's latest novel, Starter Villain, centers on an unassuming substitute teacher who unexpectedly inherits a long-lost uncle's supervillain business, complete with island volcano lair. Publishers Weekly raves that Starter Villain is a breezy and highly entertaining genre send-up which subverts classic supervillain tropes with equal measures of tongue-in-cheek humor and common sense. We are going to dive right into conversation tonight, but we will have plenty of time for audience Q&A. Simply drop your questions in the comments thread here on Facebook, and our tech manager will route them to me. You can also send a message to Club Book through Facebook Messenger or by email, where we're at clubbookmn@gmail.com. So, John, welcome to Club Book.
Hey, Naomi, how are you doing?
Great, how are you?
I'm very good. We were talking backstage about the fact that we have known each other like forever, since the turn of the century. And I do want to show off what I was showing off. This is one of Naomi's first books. It's the third book in her Dead Rivers trilogy called Freedom Sisters. And I remember getting all three of those. It's so exciting to actually be like, look, I still have this. It's still up on my shelves. Also, again, to not talk about me first, but talk about you. Hey, how many Nebula nominations did you just get, Naomi?
I am nominated in 3 categories.
3 categories.
That's pretty
3.
cool.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But wait, there's more. Also a Minnesota Book Award. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm also nominated for the Minnesota Book Award.
I'm going to be interviewing you. So how does it feel to be so awesome? Just curious.
Pretty cool. It feels great.
It feels good. And I'm so excited about that. I remember when you won your I think it was your first Hugo. Was it 2016?
Yeah, 2016. I won a Hugo.
I was there when it happened, and I was just geeking out because we were at the after party after the Hugos, and I was just like, oh, Naomi Kritzer, you're my favorite.
So let's talk about your book, John.
Okay, let's talk about my book.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk
that one.
One. Starter Villain.
Yeah, so that is some of the best cover art I've ever seen.
It is the best cover, and I will tell you why this makes me so happy. I mean, first, a shout out to Tristan Elwell, who is the artist who absolutely 100% nailed the assignment, right? But the thing that I love about this is that this cover is basically a masterclass of what covers are and are supposed to do, right? Because first you have this just genuinely amazing art, which has sold, I think, so many of the books. I was on tour and I was talking to people as they were coming through in the line to get their books signed. And more than once, someone said to me, I have no idea who you are, but I saw the cover and I had to have it. So,
Hmm.
that is the first, rule of books is that, that the cover needs to grab them and draw them in. So the first thing your eye hits is, of course, the cat in the suit, and it's just done as like a corporate oil painting, and people are like, what the heck? Everybody who loves cats is immediately like 70% there. Then you go up and you see the meet the new boss line, which for everybody above the age of 50 means one thing, and everybody below the 50 means another. For everybody above the age of 50, it's, the who line, you
Yeah,
know,
the new boss, same as the old boss. So what does it mean for the kids?
with yeah, for the kids, I think it just means that they think that here's the boss, which is
Oh,
not entirely wrong, but it's also just kind of a clever sort of, it's like whatever your expectations of what this book would be are a little bit different. And then you hit starter villain, great title, and then New York Times bestselling author John Scalzi. So basically, it gives you all the information. So for the people who don't know who I am, cat, clever thing up here, catchy title, New York Times bestseller, your assurance of quality. Other people have bought it, so you don't feel bad. And then for the people who like me, John Scalzi, they're like, well, it's John Scalzi. I guess I'll buy it. Um, it's the best cover ever. I know that when Debbie, who is the publisher at Tor, looked at it, she's like, yes, this. So when the actual publisher of your publishing company is like, I'm 100% behind that, that's not a bad thing for you.
no.
No.
Do you know anything about the development process for the art? Like, was
Oh
the
yeah.
artist given guidelines or?
Yeah, no. So what happened was we bounced a couple of ideas around. I mean, I've been very fortunate with Tor that they have been very good with including me on cover stuff before. And so we did a few treatments, and there were some things that I, thought, that they were trying that wasn't quite working for me, and then a couple other things that were. And so this is like the second or third concept that we were looking for. And as soon as we had the kind of rough of it, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's the one." And then and then Tristan came in at that point. What I believe was involved before then, but obviously, then came in and did the cover art, and it's digital. He did it digitally, but it was designed very specifically, like I said, to look like a corporate oil painting. Like, here's
Yeah.
the guy who founded this in 1850 and all that sort of stuff. So once again, he came through. I mean, even if you look very carefully, it's got faint sort of like oil painting cracks and stuff on it.
Nice.
It's just really nifty. I don't know how many iterations they got through before they got it to me, but I don't think it was too many. I think with that one, it was pretty clear where it was going. Like I said, I've been very, very fortunate, and also very fortunate that Tor, generally speaking, has done a really good job with my covers. I can't think of a particular time that I've looked at a cover of mine from Tor where I was like, that's not it, or
Mhm.
I tried to have to explain it for some other publishers that I've worked with. I've had that problem with mostly with the nonfiction books. But it is what it is. And, the unfortunately, most of the time, writers don't get too much of a say in the cover, which is not necessarily a bad thing because
Mm.
I am not a visual artist.
Right.
It's not my core competency. And beyond that, the other thing that I think people have to realize is covers are not just about things that you like. It's selling the book not just to readers, but also to booksellers. So
Yeah.
like the cover to Old Man's War had the paperbacks all have a John Harris cover art. John Harris was the guy who did the covers for Speaker of the Dead and a lot of other big science fiction hits. So when they gave me a John Harris cover, that was them communicating both to booksellers and then to readers. It's like it's this kind of book, right? And then later on, when Ann Leckie came out with the Ancillary Justice books, those were John Harris cover too, for the exact same reason. It was putting us in a tradition. I certainly don't mind being in the same tradition as Ann Leckie, I have to say.
Mary Robinette Cole's talking cat Elsie was clearly an inspiration for the cats in the book. For those
Yes.
who are not familiar with Mary Robinette Cole, is another science fiction fantasy writer, former president of SIFWA, and she has a cat named Elsie who she has trained to press buttons to communicate. And
Right.
Elsie, some cats take to it, some cats don't. Elsie is really quite into it, and
Yep.
uses them largely to say, play with me, play with me, play with me, play with me, play with me.
Right.
Have you met Elsie, and have you considered trying buttons with your cats?
So, two-part question. The first one, I have not met Elsie. Oh, no, I take that back. I have met Elsie. I haven't met Elsie at her current residence, but I met her beforehand. I don't think I made much of an impression of her. I think she looked at me and was like, "I'll be in the other room."
Yeah.
I mean, fair.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the way it works. But I will say, watching the videos of Elsie hitting the buttons, right?
Mhm.
Uh, was actually an inspiration. So it's not a spoiler at this point, especially given the cover. There are intelligent cats in this book, right? And they communicate with basically keyboards. And so what I was imagining is it kind of somewhere between the button boards that Elsie uses, the play or feed or unha, that had the individual phrases, and like a stenographer's keypad where they do the chording to do various words and stuff like that. So something like that. But it was in fact Mary Robinette's cat that gave me the impetus to be like, that makes sense. Because whenever you see an animal like talking, uh,
Mm,
that super nerdy part of me, the super nerdy part that's just like, no, that's not right, is like gets by because their mouths are not shaped to speak
right.
like have human shaped sounds. And if they were, that cat would freak you out. It would be plunged all the way into the uncanny valley and you wouldn't be able to stand it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea of the button boards was a really good idea. I don't want my cats to have a button board, and because we have three cats, Smudge, Sugar, and Spice, and I suspect that if Smudge got a keyboard, um, then he would very quickly hack into the mainframe and launch the missiles and all that sort of stuff. He's not to be trusted. I feel very strongly about this. And I don't think that Sugar has any interest in that because all she communicates is pet me, pet me, pet me, pet me, go away. Right? She's the pretty princess of the three. And then Spice literally sits on my desk while I'm writing. So I already feel her disdain as I'm writing. She's like, really? You want to use that gerund? Are you sure that that's a good idea? It's like I feel like her judgment every time I write a sentence. So I think if I got them all button boards, it would be the end. My wife, Chrissy, did get a button board for the dog. Um,
Mhm.
but the dog didn't take to it, and also the dog is Charlie is so expressive anyway. There is absolutely no doubt what Charlie wants at any one time. But also Charlie's a very simple dog. She wants to be walked, she wants to be fed, and she wants up on the furniture, which she's absolutely not allowed to. So that every time that I walk down the stairs, I walk extra loud so she has time to get off the couch so I don't have to catch her.
Mm. Mm,
So, yeah.
yeah. I made a note when I was reading the book that
Yeah.
just said, pitch and pitch, wish fulfillment. Um, my question was that a wish fulfillment scene, and was that a scene you created for that book, or was that a long-standing fantasy that you found a place for?
So, without spoiling too much for folks, a pitch and pitch was basically the idea that a bunch of aspiring tech dudes would get to do a sort of Shark Tank or sort of thing where they get to pitch an idea. And if they were successful, then they would get to go to like a one-on-one with someone who might actually get the money. But if they didn't, then they would basically meet a vaguely ridiculous end. And what that is, I leave for people to read. Um, but here's the thing is that I actually spent a fair amount of time either in tech, I used to work at AOL, or consulting for tech companies. Um, and in the course of, more than a decade of doing that, I met a lot of bros, right?
Mhm.
And the dynamic of that, I also did video games. It's a lot of the same dynamic there. Um, and so much of what the tech world um, is not necessarily people who are interested in having a good idea, as they are getting an idea that somebody else thinks is good enough to fund, which are two separate sorts of things. And I don't want to fault anyone for this. I mean, because tech is just the latest iteration of that. I remember being in college in the late 80s, early 90s, and the hotness then was all these like hip magazines like Spy and Egg and George and all of those magazines, and everybody who was involved with it was like, this is the one that's gonna make us all a lot of money. It's gonna be cool and all that sort of stuff. And most of them flamed out. None of them exist anymore. So that dynamic that is visited upon us in tech is not limited to tech. There's always going to be people who are going to be on the hustle, on the move, on the make. But right now it is tech. And so the idea of just like lining up these all these bros to like do a firing line pitch and having most of them fail was just kind of fun for me. Also, especially because in the book, because the book is called Starter Villain, right? It is talking about how, basically the origin story of how do people become the sort of people who eventually lose touch with people, not because they were originally evil, but because the higher you go up on the status chain, the less and less you encounter and interact with any human who is going to interact with you with anything other than servility, right? Not civility, servility. And quite honestly, it's we look at the billionaires that we have today, and they seem to be increasingly turning into monsters. And I don't want to excuse them for turning into monsters because they're still monsters, but it's also kind of a natural thing. After you've made your first billion, who's going to tell you no about anything, right? Because you can get rid of all the people who would stand up to you, and everybody else you can just pay to be like, yes, sir, you're brilliant. What a great idea. And so it becomes its own sort of cocooning. And when that happens, the propensity to fall down a hole of just being evil uh, increases because you no longer have the same considerations about other people and other people's concerns that anyone else has. I mean, you look at the bugbears of the billionaire class, and they're just nuts, right? Or you listen to, like, my favorite example is not actually Elon Musk, although that's the one people always go to, but the billionaire who is like, oh, I've decided that I'm going to live forever
Oh God.
by draining the blood of my son and putting it into my own body. And you're like listening to this, and you're like, isn't somebody telling you no? And the answer is no, because at
No.
that point, nobody's going to tell you. It's like, what a great idea. I'm going to actually literally suck the blood from my child so that I can look. And don't I look young? It's like, no, you look very strange.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not young that you look. You look like a man who's draining the life force out of his child in a desperate attempt not to age. Right. And so, yeah, so to take some like, uh, basically young polyp versions of these guys who want to become the blood draining never agers, and sort of get them on the ground floor was kind of lots of fun to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that guy is so creepy. He's so like it's like, you know, the vampires make a great metaphor, but then when you like take the metaphor and turn it back into reality, it just somehow gets
Yeah,
even
no, no,
creepier than like Vlad.
no human should be emulating Elizabeth Bathory.
Right,
That's just
right.
a ground rule that I think everybody should. But that's the whole point. Is like I said, if you get to a certain level where the the means to do completely weird and creepy things is well within your grasp.
Mhm.
There's no one who's going to tell you no. And it also works in other ways. It's not just taking platelets from your kid. But it's also the thing of going down this hole of bigotry or weirdness, and all the people that you kind of came up with are just kind of like, I don't want to hang up with this. But there's definitely a whole other group of people. You get all new friends when you do that. And once again, when you're a billionaire, it's like people are happy to be friends with you simply because, now they have entree into a world that they may not have had before. And you don't even have to be a billionaire. I'm sure $100 million would do just fine. I don't know. Give me $100 million, I'll see if I become a monster. But
Right.
right.
We can run that experiment.
Yeah, strangely enough, I don't think someone's going to give me, here's $100 million. What happens to your conscience? I was like, I don't know. But yeah, it's weird. And that's again the fun thing about this particular book, without like hitting people on the head, because fundamentally it's a story that has in fact typing cats and dolphins trying to form a union and all that. There's some ridiculous stuff in there. But one of the nice things about it for me is to talk about what real world villainy looks like. It's not going to be the James Bond villainy of, oh, I'm going to take this laser and I'm going to carve my name into the moon or anything like that. It is literally going to be, what a lot of the billionaire class is doing, which is just like, I'm just going to create as much money and power to myself like a dragon on a horde, and be really bland about it so nobody sees it until it's too late. And when people do finally notice, they'll be like, oh, well, I guess I am evil. Oh.
Yeah. So speaking of servility or lack thereof, let's talk a little bit about the dolphins, because the dolphins are not on the cover, but also really great.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
and the dolphins are not servile. The dolphins are rude.
The
And
dolphins are rude. But dolphins
yeah,
are rude. Have you? This is one of the great things that has happened in the last like 15 years is like whoever was doing press for dolphins like got fired, and all the horrible things that dolphins do has come up to light. Like
yeah,
they're terrible.
they
They're
are.
they're drug users. Have you heard this? They like
I
use
knew that.
that there's like a fish, I think it's like a puffer fish or something like that, that when they like taunt it so that it releases a toxin, and then they get high on it, and then they pass the puffer fish to the next dolphin. So basically they're just, they're drug using bullies of the sea,
Mhm.
right? And it's not just them. I mean, every cute little animal that you've ever seen apparently is just horrible. But dolphins, like I said, for so long had such good press that it was a delight to actually have dolphins who that I just allowed them to be jerks. But they're jerks with a point,
They
right?
are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they are. So in the book, and again, it's been discussed enough at this point. It's been out for like 6 months anyway.
This
Um,
is called Club Book. I figure people like,
I figured it's
probably a lot of them will buy it.
it's not going to spoil the book to know that the dolphins are trying to form a union, because you will then read it and be like, oh, okay, I get where they're going with that. The experience of them forming the union is the important thing. But that was the whole thing, is that this book came out at the same time as what they were calling hot union summer, where you had the WGA and SAG-AFTRA on strike, and then all these other strikes that were going on. And I can't claim that I was psychic or anything like that, but having dolphins with a distinct labor philosophy certainly was rather coincidentally well timed for me, and I think people particularly enjoyed it. And that's, but that's also the point. It's like, you don't have to be a nice person in order to be able to say that you should have rights as a worker,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
So if the dolphins are jerks, it's like, well, we live in a capitalist society, and sometimes, being nice doesn't get you anywhere, but putting Scabby the rat outside of somebody's door and walking around with on a strike will get you what you want. And that's in fact, in the case of SAG-AFTRA and WGA in particular, what happened. They basically had to wear down the studios. And what was really interesting is the studio was like, oh, we'll just wait. We'll see what happens in October when they don't have any more money. It's like, they're writers and actors. None of them have money anyway. You think you're going to starve an actor? No,
Yeah.
that is the natural state of being for an actor or a writer. Come on. I mean, it's just like, we're all starving. It's just the actors are prettier.
So one of the questions that was sent in advance was whether you're able to share anything yet about the upcoming screen treatment of Starter Villain.
Oh, so the short version of that is no. And the longer version of that is no, and here's why. Which is that Starter Villain has been optioned by Paramount Pictures and Maximum Effort, which is Ryan Reynolds' production company. And it was actually optioned well before it came out, which was kind of nice. Like my manager out in Hollywood, a guy named Joel Gottler, sent it out, and immediately Paramount and Maximum Effort were like, "Oh, we want this," right? So it's nice to feel wanted. But two things happened. One, there were the aforementioned strikes, right?
Yeah.
So for many, many months, there could be no forward movement because there was no way to have it done. And then once the um, strikes were over, then the process of, can we find a screenwriter? Can we do all this sort of stuff? Was in process. I know that they have a screenwriter. I don't know if I'm allowed to say who it is, except to say that I've looked at at the screenwriter's other credits, and I'm very happy with them. So I'm not displeased. And then also, as always with anything in Hollywood, everything is a crapshoot. Old Man's War, which is the first of my books, has been under option since 2008, right?
Yeah.
And it was first at Paramount, and then it was at Sci-Fi, and now it's at Netflix. And and at one point we were really close to getting it done, and then there was a strike. And so, all of this sort of stuff. And I want to be clear that it may sound like, I'm harping on like so many things were close and then there was a strike. It's like so many things were close and then there was a strike, but the strike was necessary. And if that means that I don't get something made now, it's like, I'm okay.
A
Right.
million things can send, like, this is something I think a lot of like writers tend to know and non-writers often don't know, is just how common it is for stuff to get optioned and then not made.
Yeah. I mean, 99.9% of stuff that gets optioned just doesn't get made. So many things just fall down a hole.
Like,
Um,
you did have something made, which was Love, Death, and Robots.
yes.
2 episodes of that is that the one thing that's actually gotten to screen?
Everything, yes. The 5 episodes that are based on short stories of mine. I've written scripts of 3 of them, and and then the others were written by Philip Gillette and Janice Robertson. but those were the ones, yes, those are the ones that have gotten made. And they're all those little short stories. Like one of the most famous one, which was the Three Robots story, which is made into Three Robots. And then we did a sequel that was called Three Robots Exit Strategies. The original short story of that I wrote for what is it? Fairies versus Robots. And the reason I did that was Nava Wolf, who is was one of the editors of it, just basically came up to me at a convention and just started poking me. She's like, write something, write something, write something. I'm going to keep poking you until you write something for me. And I'm like, fine, I'm going to write something. And I literally wrote that story in like 45 minutes just to be like, here, take it. And then it got bought and has become part of this thing. And it's been huge, which goes to show that you never know what is going to be made and what isn't. And it's just all a crapshoot. And it's kind of weird. There are people now who have tattoos of the robots in the Love, Death, and Robots. I've seen them. They're awesome. And it's also kind of weird because you look at it and you're like, you permanently have attached to your body something that came out of my brain, and I don't know how to feel about this.
Somebody from Facebook is wondering how closely you work with Will Wheaton on the audiobooks.
Oh, okay.
Names, energy, and feeling behind lines, etc.
So Will and I actually have a long history of doing audio stuff together. Way back when, I mean, before Will had started doing audiobooks, and we had just met, because we had met because he and I had a friend in common, named Michael Burns. And Michael Burns and he were talking one time about books, and Will was like, "Oh, hey, I've read this book called Old Man's War. It's amazing. It's by this guy named John Scalzi. Do you know of him?" And he was like, "Yes, I was in his wedding." He was like my best man. So that's how we met. And early on, he'd asked to borrow one of my short stories as basically as an audition reel for audiobooks. And I remembered that when later on Audible bought a lot of my backlist to turn into audiobooks, and they're like, is there anybody you think would be good for this? And I was like, yes, get Will Wheaton. Not just because he was a friend and I wanted to throw some business his way or something like that, but Will and I, we grew up in the same area. We both grew up in Los Angeles County. We're both Gen Xers. He's a couple years younger than I am, but I mean, and our cadences and the way that we speak and how we speak and even how we write, if you've ever read his blogs or any of his books, are fairly similar. So I think that working with Will is as close to getting me to read an audiobook as we're going to get, but better because he is a professional actor, and I'm just this mush-mouthed uh, uh, writer. And it's perfectly fine when I'm going on tour and reading stuff at a book stop or something like that. But it's an entirely different thing when we're trying to sell books to people. So Will and I actually have a very good relationship. He gets the books early. He can text me because we have each other's phone numbers. He can text me and be like, "How on earth do you pronounce this thing?" And I can tell him. And any point where he has questions, he can just call and ask. So it's that sort of relationship that I think makes for better books in terms of audio. And certainly he's been very popular in terms of all my narrators. And that's why we keep coming back to him again and again. Basically, my feeling about it is as long as he wants to narrate my books, I'm very happy to have him do so.
There's a question that was sent in advance from an audience member who, like me, knew you first as a blogger. Person says, "I'm glad you stuck with it long after some creators I used to follow dropped it. How did the whatever come to be, and what do you enjoy most about it?"
So the Whatever, which is my blog, has been around since 1998. And I used to work for newspapers, and I actually had a newspaper column. Here's a fun fact that you may not know, which was in 1993, I was up for a job at the St. Paul Pioneer Press.
Wow.
And it came down to me and one other guy, the guy who was the film critic way back when. It was a guy named Chris Williams or Chris Williamson. Um, it was down between me and him. And they went with him, I think in part because he was already local, right? But that's kind of funny to me. All for a twist of fate. I might have already been in Minnesota in the
He's,
St. Paul area.
one of our many science fiction writers.
Right.
Yeah.
We might have met like a whole decade earlier or something.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'd worked on newspapers. I was doing film critic stuff, but I was also a opinion columnist
Mhm.
at the age of 24, which was a tremendously bad idea. Uh, you know, I I used to tell people that my job as a opinion columnist at age 24 was a professional mansplainer. I'm surprised I didn't get punched in the face a lot. I eventually, hopefully, got a little bit better at that. But eventually, I left newspapers, but I wanted to keep up in that format of writing because in the late 90s, I was like, well, maybe one day I'll work for a newspaper again, right? And as it happened, there was another newspaper columnist, a guy named James Lilix, who works for the Star Tribune, who had been doing a daily blog at that time, back before they were called blogs, they were called online diaries. And
God.
and I was like, well, that's how I should do it. So September 13th, 1998, I started writing a daily blog, again, just to keep in practice in that format. I never worked for a newspaper again, not like as a full-time job. I did some spot work here and there. But the blog just kept going because I enjoyed writing it. I caught the wave of that era of social media where blogs were the new hotness. And of course, Old Man's War and Agent to the Stars, I posted on the website and then they both sold to publishers. So that was kind of fun. I've kept at it mostly because I enjoy doing it. And also because it allows me to do stuff that I don't necessarily do in my novels. My novels, I'm trying to tell a specific story over 90,000 words. And on the blog, I get to talk about basically whatever I want to talk about. For a long time, I could talk about politics, I could talk about family life, I could talk about things in writing, so on and so forth. And I've just never gotten a reason to quit. Nowadays, the other reason that I do it is um, as we can as we are watching Twitter fall from its previous state to basically just being 4chan, right? Uh, it's a reminder that, and other places have disappeared completely. It's a reminder that you can't rely on other people to for your presence in the online world. It always makes sense to have your own place. Like I have more followers on Blue Sky than visit the website every day, right? But Blue Sky, who knows how long Blue Sky is going to be around? Who knows how long Threads is going to be around? Knows how long Facebook is going to be around? I remind people that, I used to work for America Online, and America Online was a big thing at one point. What happened to Vine? What happened to Awkward? What happened to all of these sites, MySpace, that were the preeminent spaces? They go away. And if you've put your entire life on those, your entire social media life goes away with them. But if you have a blog, particularly if you are a creative person, a writer, an artist, actor, whatever, people will always be able to find you in that place. So I do it because I enjoy it, but I also do it because um, I've done it for 25 years and I've seen 3 or 4 generations of social media come and go. And I've learned in that time that it's best that ultimately people are able to find you under your own name, just not on whatever is the hot new social media of the day.
Someone from Facebook is asking a question that I had also made a note to ask, which is, are you a plotter or a pantser, or do you reject the binary, the plotter versus pantser binary?
Well, I'll tell you what I reject. I reject the word pantser. I viscerally hate that word. It's just awful. It's just like one of those words that just gets my thing. Or the phrase, it's right up there with the phrase, don't yuck someone's yum. I mean, as a philosophy, I agree with that.
I
Let
just don't
people
like it.
enjoy whatever that, but that phrase itself.
Yeah.
So, so I am a person who writes to discover what he has to say,
Okay.
right? I don't do outlines. I do outlines when I'm doing nonfiction work. Like I did a book on astronomy and it made sense. Like, here's the chapters and here's how it's all going to go, right? But for novels, um, part of what I enjoy is writing a chapter and finding out where it goes. Like just today, I was writing a chapter in the novel that will come out next March, right? A year from now, a year and a week, actually. Exactly. 53 weeks from now, you'll have a new book from me. So I'm writing that chapter and I know what I wanted to have happen in that chapter, right? Um, and the thing that I wanted to have happen in the chapter did happen, but how it happened and what the characters said to each other and how we got to those specific plot points was very different than how I imagined it at first in my head. And part of that's just the writing and listening to how the characters interact with each other and who the characters are supposed to be and all of that sort of stuff. I was going to have it a lot more hectic. It was a lot more hectic in my head than it eventually turned out. Um, but I think that writing it was I found out that I didn't need that level of hecticness. I needed to get a specific bit of information out in conversation. And that's actually really cool. You know, the whole thing of writing the book and listening to the story tell you what it actually needs as opposed to what it is you thought you needed in your head. Because here's the thing is that in your head, um, you have this sort of weirdly pure idea of what this idea will be, but the weirdly pure idea doesn't have any granularity to it. It doesn't have actual dialogue. It doesn't actually have text. It doesn't have people responding to each other or any of that sort of stuff. And I think that people get frustrated thinking about the version that's in their head is somehow perfect, and what comes out of their fingertips is imperfect. But I think it's the other way around. What is in your head is so idealized that it has no sharp edges and it has no rough spots. It's impractically connected because you don't look at it that closely. You only see the shiny bits that you think are awesome. And then when you have to write it out, then you have to put all the connective tissue together and it becomes more real and it actually becomes more human. And so while I certainly understand the idealized version in people's heads, I don't think that is the idealized version is actually the best version of the story that you're ever going to get because all you're seeing are all the pretty parts in your head, not all the parts that are like, oh, I actually have to make a Frankenstein monster that actually shambles from one place to the next. So.
One of the questions we got in advance, which of your books was the easiest to write and which was the hardest?
See, there's so many weird ways to answer that.
Yeah,
Like, for example, I have a novel that I wrote in 2 weeks,
yeah.
right? Um, and on one hand, that was the easiest to write because it took 2 weeks, right?
Mhm.
That was very quick. On the other hand, it was the most miserable 2 weeks of my life. It was a book where I looked at my calendar and I'm like, oh, it's June 4th. Oh, the book is due June 18th. Oh, right. And I turned to Chrissy and I'm like, you will slide food under this door. And every day there will be a jug by the door that you will remove. And she's like, no to the jug because the bathroom is literally on the other side of that wall. But the whole sliding food under the door was pretty much basically what happened. And I wrote 8,000 words a day. And by the time I was done, my hands were twitching. And when I pressed send, I went downstairs and I was like, I was too wired to sleep. and I was like, I'll watch Teen Titans Go because that's where my brain is at, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and after 10 minutes of Teen Titans Go, I had to stop because it was too complex for me to get. Uh,
Yeah.
so and on the other hand, I've had books that have taken months, like 9 months or 11 months to write and almost a year to write. But they were very easy to write because I was just writing at a very slow pace and I was just putting them together when I got to them. The one that I think was kind of miraculous about how it came together was Kaiju Preservation Society. Um, because I was writing a book in 2020 that was supposed to be a dark and gritty political thriller.
Oh
Um,
God.
right, not a great year, not a great
No
year
one
to
wants to read
be.
that. No one wants to write that.
No one wants to write, no one wants to read that,
Mhm.
especially after all the time that we doing that thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I just couldn't finish it. My brain just ground. And I've always been, because journalism training, I was always uh deadlines are sacrosanct. You don't
Mhm.
miss a deadline. But I just couldn't get this book to fly. And I finally had to send Patrick, my editor, a note that was like, look, it's not working at all. And I don't know what to do. And I'm sorry, but I can't finish this book. I hate this book and I hate the way that I feel trying to finish it. And he was very cool about it. He was like, you've never done this before. We know it's not you freaking out. This is a serious problem. So they're like, all right, it's off the schedule. We'll figure out what we have to do. And that was great because I had at that point I'd only had 6 weeks to finish the book. I had no idea what I was going to do. It just wasn't working. I went to go take a shower, and my brain was like, oh, hey, now that you're done thinking about that book you were never going to write anyway, I've had this book rolling around in the dark recesses you didn't know about. It's called Kaiju Preservation Society. Here it is. Flunk. And literally the entire plot of the book downloaded on my brain. And I went and I immediately typed to Patrick, I'm like, give me fucking 6 weeks, I'll have a book for you because I got this great idea. And it took 5 weeks. Um, but that book just flowed. It was just so easy because the boulder of that other book just was removed from my head. And this one was also, I don't care if it's deep. I just want it to be fun because I need to be writing something that's fun right now. And so it was therapeutic for me. It allowed me to actually reconnect with the joy of writing after a whole year of trying to write this other book that wasn't working. And when it was done, it was just everything about it was basically it didn't need any revisions. It was basically as it was. And it made me happy. It made them happy. The book came out, and a whole bunch of people were like, this book has made me happy after a miserable year being trapped in a house. Thank you very much. And so it was just kind of magic how that one came together. I can't say that Starter Villain was that easy to write because I got COVID about halfway through writing it. And my brain just stopped working. And Patrick, again, who had had some experience with COVID, was like, stop writing for at least a month, right? Because your brain isn't going to be able to process things anyway. And I was like, I'm the world's laziest person. You don't have to tell me not to write. Oh, I will gladly not write for months at a time. So I took a month off writing. And then a month after that, I was like, oh, yeah, I feel better. I'll start writing again. And I started writing again. And then a month after that, the COVID fog actually lifted. And I looked at the 30,000 words that I had written in that month. And
Mhm.
I'm like, oh no, no one should ever see these
Um,
words ever. They weren't, they were like, they were the equivalent of then the guy walked over here, then the guy said that, and then this happened, and then this guy said that, right? And in my COVID brain fog, it seemed so much more clever than it was. And then once that lifted, I was just like, oh, I get it. I get it now. So I had to basically check the structure that I wrote for those 30,000 words still worked, but all the dialogue, all the descriptions, all the had to go out and I had to rewrite all of those 30,000 words. So that one was less fun, simply because my brain stopped working.
Yeah.
Uh, which is not a great thing when you're a writer. It's like your job is to actually have your brain work. And to have it all of a sudden just be like, oh no, that thing that you thought you did, that you have been doing your whole life, that you have no other skill that you can possibly do, oh, you're not going to do it for months at a time, is a little weird. It's a little weird. I don't recommend it for anyone. Please keep your vaccinations up to date, folks.
So question from Messenger. Someone asks what advice you have for aspiring science fiction and fantasy writers.
My advice is incredibly boring. And it's the advice I'm sure that you've heard many, many times. One, read widely, and not just in science fiction and fantasy. Like I tell people that, I mean, obviously, Robert Heinlein is an influence on me. Obviously, people in science fiction have been influences, but an equal influence on how I write science fiction is Gregory MacDonald, who wrote the Fletch books, where dialogue was so important they were actually cover art, right? Or Nora Ephron, the way that she wrote relationships and characters. She never wrote science fiction in her life, as far as I can tell, but she is someone who is absolutely critical to my development as a writer. Elaine May, who is a screenwriter, who wrote The Birdcage and did an uncredited rewrite for Tootsie. These sorts of folks, that snap and crackle of the dialogue, the back and forth, all of that sort of stuff is equally important to anything that I wrote or read in science fiction. So that's one thing. Read a lot, read widely. The other thing is honestly button chair, right? Um, and when you're starting out with anything, have the recognition that you're gonna suck, right? It's not a bad thing. I was like, I've got over here you can't see it because but I've got a guitar over here, right? When I first started playing guitar, I was terrible. Absolutely, absolutely terrible. And the only way that you get better is to do it over and over and over and over and over again and start playing stuff and until you actually feel like you have some facility for the instrument. Writing is the same thing. Everybody thinks because you can do email or because you post stuff on Facebook or other social media, that is writing and that you can do writing. And you can, Facebook posts are writing. But the sort of sustained storytelling that you get with short stories or novelettes or novellas or novels, or graphic novels or any of that sort of stuff, is something that you only get to do well with practice. And so having to actually sit down and do it is the way to do it. And be okay with the fact that the first things that you do aren't going to be great, because everybody, no matter what you're doing, the first time you try to bake a loaf of bread or make cookies, you're probably going to screw them up. You're going to put in too much butter and your cookies are going to be flat, like death, like frisbees, or you're going to put in too much baking soda and they're going to be these puffy things. I still can't get cookies right. My daughter does perfect cookies. I don't know why she can do them and I can't. I'm super jealous.
You
But
follow the recipe?
you know what? I do follow the recipe and it still doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
The problem is me. But my point is that you get used to the idea that, you know, there's going to be this extended period where you're not going to be very good. And then one day, the things that used to be hard for you all of a sudden become easier to do, and then become automatic for you to do. And it's just because you practiced and practiced and practiced. The other thing I suggest, and this is not something that I think everybody can do, but it certainly worked for me, is if you can do a stint as an editor, even if it's like acquiring slush, like any science fiction magazine needs slush readers, absolutely needs slush readers. Um, Go ahead and do that. I was an editor of a humor area for America Online for 2 years. If you back in the 90s, late 90s, when you signed into AOL, you know how they had the triangle up there? If you clicked on that triangle, it would take you to a secret area that had like cartoons and essays and stuff like that. And I was the editor of that. And we had 20 slots a month for that. And we had 1,000 submissions a month. And at the end of every month where I was looking at submissions, I would still have 5 to 10 slots open, right? Because comedy is hard. And so I ended up having to walk people through how to make things good and how to, make things funny and do all of that sort of stuff. And after I did that, I went back to the writing that I wrote prior to being an editor. And I was like shocked that anyone let me get any of my words published at all, right? Editing made a huge difference. And it also made me much less precious about my work, right?
Mm.
Working with other people with their writing makes it easier to look at your own writing a lot more critically and be like, no, that's not working. So if you have that opportunity, even if it's just reading slush, absolutely take it. It will make you a better writer. But generally speaking, read a lot, write a lot. Don't worry if you suck, you will get better just from practice. And I think that's the way that to do it.
So we've got time for like one more question. So since you were
Do
just
it.
talking about reading a lot, I want to ask a question that was sent in, which is what reads you are recommending right now to fans who have devoured your backlist and want more Scalzi-esque content?
I don't know who's doing Scalzi-esque content. That's a very difficult question. Part of it is also I don't read a whole lot of stuff that is very much like what I do. Um,
I think you could just tell them what books you read recently that you think would be, or
oh, what
that
have I?
you enjoyed.
I will say, um, most of what I've been reading is stuff for blurbing, which hasn't come out yet. So
Right. Okay.
I can't really talk about those yet. I will say that I really enjoyed this last year, aside from all the controversies that happened with the Hugos this last year, which was a real mess. I'm looking forward to next year's Hugos because I think those folks are going to right that ship again, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but I will say the novels that were listed as finalists, rightly or wrongly, were really good reads. There was the Mary Robinette had a book in there. Uh, so that was great. Travis Baldry's book was a whole lot of fun. I just love the idea of it's your D&D characters, but they run a coffee shop. I love
Yeah.
Sylvia Moreno Garcia's book was tremendous. It was just a really good year for books that were fun to read. Also, TK Kingfisher. I just saw Ursula on the Joko cruise. Ursula being TK Kingfisher, they're the same person with different names for their books. So those were actually really good reads. I recommend uh, Mary Robinette Cole a lot for people, especially her Lady Astronaut series, which I think was tremendous. If you like my military science fiction, then Marco Cluse, who is a former student of mine at Viable Paradise, has a series of books that is very much kind of will be up your boat. And then if you like the sort of humor I did in Redshirts specifically, the book that I always throw people to for that after that is one that's called Space Opera by Catherine Valente, which was nominated for a Hugo and is sort of like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy crossed with Eurovision with unexpected heart, which is of course what you need when you're writing sort of farcical stuff, is that you make them laugh before you absolutely rip their heart out and stuff. But also, Naomi, tell us about the books that you have that have just come out so that people
Oh,
can.
I have a book that came out in November called Liberty's Daughter. It is
Yeah,
up for the Minnesota Book Award,
yeah.
and for the Andre Norton Award, and it is if you like Old Man's War and the other Heinlein influenced work of John's, it is also Heinlein influenced, though in a different way. So
Yes, yes.
it's described as if Podkane of Mars was written by Podkane. Was one of the descriptions it got. So
That's
anyway.
excellent. I'm just super excited for you. I mean, the whole thing about the three Nebula nominations and the Minnesota Book Award. I was nominated for Kaiju got nominated for the Ohioana Book Award last year.
Yeah.
State awards are fun, aren't
You know
they?
what? You're great. Yeah, no, yeah, on my list of questions that I don't think there's time for at this point, we should probably be wrapping up. But I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about being a writer in Ohio, because Minnesota and Ohio, both like northern, Midwestern, non-coastal, far from where the book trees and the movie trees grow.
Yeah.
And yeah,
It's
you
I will answer this. I think we can go just a smidge long just to answer this because I think it's absolutely something that I think is really cool. All of my science fiction stuff, with the one exception of Agents of the Stars, um, all of it was written here. Hold on, I'm going to turn it around in that corner, right where that monitor is. Every single book of mine has been written there in a town of 1800 where we regularly hear Amish clop on by, right? Um, and just it tickles me that so much of the future is coming out of Bradford, Ohio, that
Mhm.
nobody ever expects. And I've been really, I grew up in California. I lived in suburban Washington, D.C., and I went to school in Chicago. I have been consistently surprised at how supportive not only my little town of Bradford, but the entire state of Ohio has been. When I got nominated for the Astounding Award, which used to be the Campbell Award, I got a proclamation from the House of Ohio, right?
Oh my gosh.
And then when I won the Hugo Award, I got another proclamation, not only from the House, but from the Senate as well. And I'm just like, "Woo," you know. And then the Ohioana Award, which is literally an award in the shape of Ohio.
Yeah.
Uh, and I won the fan favorite award last year, which was delightful. Um, the state knows that I exist. They know that
Yeah.
I'm part of their kind of history. They did a map once of all the the Ohioana Library did a map of all the like major literary people who have ever lived in Ohio, and they've got Sherwood Anderson, and they've got all these folks. But over here in Bradford, they've got one that's like, there's John Scalzi. I'm like, oh, I'm a major Ohio writer. It just tickles me. And I think it's probably the same with you, right? It's like there is a surprisingly strong, for people who don't know, a surprisingly strong community of science fiction and fantasy writers in the Twin Cities area.
Yes. Yeah. There are a lot of really good writers it's not just science fiction and fantasy, but there's a lot of writers in the Twin
Yeah.
Cities.
Yeah.
It's there's a kind of an amazing depth to the writing community here.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, um it's a good place. It's a good place to be a writer. I think it helps. I think it helps if living. There's something about being a writer and living in a state where it's very cold and unpleasant for a good chunk of the year. I think
It's like I might as well write a novel. I
might
can't.
as well write a novel. It's too cold to go outside anyway. So
Yeah.
anyway, all right. I should probably end here, but thank you so much, John, for making time for us tonight. I really appreciate it. And
Well, and also thank you, Naomi, for taking part in this conversation with me. Like I said, you are one of my oldest and dearest friends in the science fiction fantasy community. So A, any chance to chat with you is awesome. And B, I'm just always so appreciative of when we were starting out and you were just that much more advanced than me. You were just so kind to me and so supportive, and I have never ever forgotten that. And it always just, touches me that both we get to still be friends and that you have had such success in this field. I'm just so proud to know you.
I am I am proud to know you as well. And it is, I'll say you are a great illustration of how like the the neophyte writer that one is like, like meeting for the first time and like, chatting with one day is like, your New York Times bestseller the next. So be very nice to everyone you meet is the best,
Right. You never
best
know.
advice.
You
You
never
never
know
know.
indeed.
So this has been a virtual presentation of Club Book, a long-running literary series of Melsa made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Special thanks again to Carver County Library for the part they played in bringing John to us. Before you log off, look for the Club Book survey link, which is in the comments and will be projected in place of my video momentarily. Last, consider joining Club Book on Monday, April 8th for their next virtual program, this one featuring New York Times chart-topping mystery writer Nita Prose, author of The Maid and The Mystery Guest. You can learn more about that and other upcoming events at clubbook.org. Have a great night, everyone.